We continue the football discussion and whatever else may come up with the CFL on TSN's Matthew Scianitti, who joins us on video chat. Afternoon for him, morning for us. Good day, Matt.
Good morning, everybody. Hope everybody is safe and well out there.
You didn't have to get all dressed up for us, Matt. Did you have an appointment this afternoon?
The funny thing, Rod, is we're still doing work, and we're trying to be professional, even though we're home for, what is it now, day 19? So, yeah, this is, believe me, I'm wearing my workout shorts on the bottom half because I'm doing an interview after I talk to you guys. So we're giving off the presentation of being professional, but still enjoying lounging at home.
My guess is, do you have a brightly colored pair of Converse kicks on with this outfit right now?
Well, I would have been showing you guys the wall of Chucks my father and I put together some years ago because I had no floor space for all of the shoes that I own, which I'm pretty sure is a symptom of something. But I didn't want to overwhelm your viewers with all of the neon Chucks that I have on a wall right by my front door. So I'm trying to help everybody's eyes out, Rod.
Thank you. Next time when this all lifts, because I think I speak for everybody that we'd kind of like to see it. Matt, here's the one question that I had of all the questions for you. It was a few years ago, I was told by a football guy in the CFL, they said, just know that Scianitti and Zach Collaros are super tight. So any report you get from Matt came from Zach. Where is it that you guys got to be so tight? And what's something about Zach that the average CFL fan wouldn't know about Zach?
Well, the story about Zach, our relationship, was the fact that when we both came into the league together, I started covering the CFL probably around 2011 for the National Post, but really my first full season was 2012 as a young reporter. And I think you guys would understand this better than most, is that you want to kind of ingratiate yourself with every athlete, every coach, everyone who's a part of an organization. And when the Argos were practicing at the University of Toronto, Mississauga, on a field out in the middle of nowhere, Zach was just starting his season, the same season that Trevor Harris started. It was when the Argos won the 100th Grey Cup, and I would spend most of my day there. And this kind of branches off to the second part of the question, which is Zach he loves to read. He reads a ton of books, and we just got talking about different books and different authors we liked. And he is very considered and well-read and loves to debate. And he debates everything. And he's like a dog with a bone. He doesn't let anything go. And the one thing, we've kind of grown up in the league together, and seeing what happened last season, knowing some of the things that he's dealt with, and it was a fitting end to a story. I know many Riders fans won't feel the same way about that, but it was good to see him, after everything he's dealt with, especially with the knee injury and the concussion issues, to win the Grey Cup and to obviously win it for the Bombers for the first time since 1990.
Right. So feeding into that, and I can tell you, full disclosure, I full on love Zach. I think he's the greatest for the same reason that you do. He's just a great guy. Do you think that him winning the Grey Cup and the Redemption Tour, beating the Ticats, beating the Riders, was understated? Because I think it's one of the greatest stories in CFL history. It doesn't seem to get as much pub as it should have, given the backstory behind it.
Yeah, and I think it's a fair point, Rod. And the reason I think it didn't is because of the other storyline that surrounded Zach, which was we in the media, thought that he was always one hit away from the end of his career. And those who were really pushing that storyline would go back to not specifically the injury that happened against Edmonton in 2015 when he tore his ACL, but more recently with the concussion issues, and obviously what had happened earlier in the season when he had that interaction with Samoy Lawrence in the third play of the 2019 season. And there was a lot of worry and wondering whether or not, if you put him in a situation, that Collaros was putting himself into any kind of danger. But knowing the offensive line, knowing the schemes that Winnipeg had that really benefited Collaros as a quarterback, I don't think that we gave that enough credit. And maybe it's partly to do with Zach as well. And you know this, Rod. The fact is, Collaros is not someone who is going to go in front of the spotlight and soak it up not necessarily because he I don't want to say that in a way that's implying that people do just in order to embrace the spotlight. Collaros is a private person. He knows he has to do interviews with media. He knows he has to interact with cameras, but he'd much rather not do that. And I think because of that, maybe it got underplayed a little bit. But I think you're exactly right. This is knowing his story, what he's overcome, knowing what the narrative was about Collaros going into that Grey Cup, and when he was traded to the Bombers after being traded to the Argos. I really think when we look back on it, knowing what he accomplished and what he did for that Bombers team, coming in at just the right time, it really put a crescendo in that story.
Hey, Matt, it's Darren DuPont. Where do you see now this story going with Zach now that Paul LaPolice isn't there? Do you see an adjustment? How do you see the next chapter playing out?
It all, Darren, has to do with Buck Pierce. What does Buck Pierce do in that new role as an offensive coordinator? Recently, the Winnipeg Ed Tate with the WinnipegBlueBombers.com was talking about just the evolution of Buck Pierce and why that relationship with Collaros was going to be so important. And he touched upon a few good points. The one thing that you know about Collaros when you're around him a lot is just the relationship he establishes in the locker room with his teammates and his attention to detail. And I can tell you this, going back to the fact that I was there and early morning, as early sometimes as Zach was there when I was just a young reporter trying to get my understanding of the CFL. Zach is in at 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning. He is there even earlier if he can be. And he, even when he wasn't starting, he was trying his best. And I point to the situation in Hamilton with Jeremiah Masoli, trying his best to provide insight. And that's the one thing that, at least in the Ed Tate article, that Buck Pierce really appreciated about Collaros is that he offered a real intellectual side to the game and actually offered different ways of looking at schemes. And for a young, or not young necessarily, but a new offensive coordinator in Buck Pierce, and knowing that they already had a pre-existing relationship that was established in a run to a Grey Cup last season, I think that benefits them quite a bit. And the fact is, there will be, at least at this point, God willing that we have a season, there will be no denying that Zach Collaros is the number one guy in Winnipeg. And because he's going to be carrying with him something that no Bombers quarterback has for 30 years, the fact that he won a Grey Cup with that team, and they still have Andrew Harris, and they still have that great offensive line. So to know that Collaros will be going in, presumably again, for a full season if we have it, or whatever the season looks like, he and Buck Pierce will be able to establish a relationship that will help that Bombers offense keep evolving.
Yeah, that's exciting. And then on the other side, what's the feeling around a team like Hamilton? I mean, they're at the peak right now, and they're hungry, and they're probably on paper, I think, head and shoulders the number one team in the CFL. I mean, this would be pretty devastating for a team that's built themselves up to be an elite team to maybe not have a season to be able to execute, right?
Yeah, it is a fair point. This is the window for the Ticats. And if you go back to the narrative that was established by Orlando Steinauer last season, and it was from the start of training camp, it was, we are going to be there. We're going to win. I said it before the game that they had nameplates that said where the Grey Cup was going to be, and they had them on everyone's locker every game day leading up to the Grey Cup. And Steinauer built that culture of expectation. Now, it seems to have obviously backfired when they faced the Bombers, and maybe, and I'm not implying this was a poor coaching strategy in as much as I might be implying that the Bombers knew that the Ticats felt themselves to be the best team in the league, and the Bombers on the day were just better. But psychologically, this is the culture that Steinauer has built, is that we are the best, and we're going to act like the best, and we're going to play like the best. However, you need a season in order to keep that momentum going. And if there is, God forbid, if there is no season, that really just changed the entire narrative in Hamilton, because there's a lot of guys who would have their contracts up. Now, there's so many other layers and permutations and nuances to what goes on with the season, but let's just play the hypothetical game and have a thought experiment about whether or not there's going to be a season. And if there's a season, Ticats go in with a tremendous amount of pressure on them. And this is where really Orlando Steinauer is going to be tested as a head coach, because you take a look at every position on that team, especially in the core group. They're starting to get a little older. And when I look at that quarterback situation, and though Dane Evans comes in as the number one guy, Jeremiah Masoli, when he comes back as that quarterback who has that confidence level and showed that he can be an MOP candidate, if he's coming back and he wants that role, is there going to be some kind of internal tension within the locker room? They did bring in some good pieces in bringing Larry Dean back and DeVere Posey. So they were able to really build on some of the depth that they had. But there's a lot of pressure because everyone in the East, especially, but across the league, is going to have the Ticats in the crosshairs, because this is the one thing that losing a Grey Cup when many people thought you were going to win it shows. It shows maybe a little bit of vulnerability, and if teams start to chip away at the Ticats throughout the season, even though the Ticats are the best on paper, that might not mean much.
Two last questions for you, Matthew. It would be a shame if there was no season. Who knows? But look at where the CFL's primed to just bust through with the Nick Arbuckles and the Dane Evans and the Jeremiah Masolis and the Cody Fajardos, right? And then the exciting young Vernon Adams, the exciting young coaches, Kahari and Orlando, and Scott Milanovic is back. Like, this is an opportunity to make a major step forward for the CFL. This is an exciting time.
Yeah, 2020, Rod, let's take away the obvious and more important health issues that are going around the world. But if you talk about the CFL season in 2020, what it could mean, it could be incredibly exciting, just given how many storylines there are. As for whether or not there will be a season, it's something I dare to even think about. There will be a lot more important decisions made in evaluating if it's even important to have a season. But if there is a way of having it and structuring it where it is obviously beneficial for all the parties involved, being the league and obviously the rights holders, and in particular TSN and the PA, this could be an exciting season, much like it was, I believe, in 2013, 2014, when the NHL had their shortened season, and it just ramps up the sense of competition. But of all of those storylines that you quite rightly pointed out, I take a look at the quarterbacks as being so interesting, given that there's a changing of the guard. And look at, when you look at all those quarterbacks, Mike Riley is going to be the oldest quarterback. Who would have thought that we'd be saying Mike Riley at 35 years old is going to be the oldest quarterback in the CFL? And he and Bo and the faces of the league are really going to have to look over their shoulder, because you name all those guys, Nick Arbuckle, Vernon Adams, Dane Evans, these are quarterbacks who, speaking to all of them as I have in the offseason, they are chomping at the bit to get their opportunity to really own the stage.
Well, they will be back at some point. So it's paused, and good times ahead for the CFL. Matthew, this has been outstanding. Our viewers chiming in. They're loving it. Thanks for this, and stay safe out there. Hope to do it again soon.
You too, guys. Talk soon.
TSN's Matthew Scianitti joining us from Toronto on video chat.
You're watching Rod Pedersen On Demand. For more of The Rod Pedersen Show, visit rodpedersen.com or follow Rod Pedersen on social media.